Hello everyone once again. I have another piece of, not vintage, but definitely obsolete broadcast equipment to show you guys today. This is an Avid AirSpeed digital video recorder. And I'm really excited to get this video done and over with because once it is, this thing's going in the dumpster. I'm sorry to say, especially because it works fine. But the thing is, this thing weighs about 60 pounds. And it's unsellable for that reason. Nobody would pay the shipping cost. $200 just within Canada to ship this thing. Nobody would pay the shipping cost to get a piece of equipment like this. It's unsellable. And it's not really of any use to me because to get the full use out of this thing, or barely any use out of this thing, you need the proprietary Avid software to communicate with it. Which I don't have, and that software required an actual USB dongle to be constantly plugged into a PC, which I don't have, and so yeah, this thing's kind of useless to me. But it does work, and it actually does have some parts in it that will be useful to me. So I know that'll probably upset some people, but I really just need to get this thing out of my apartment, and that's exactly what's happening once I'm done this video. So this thing is from around 2004, and it's a broadcast-grade digital video recorder. This is basically a server-grade PC running FreeBSD, of all things. It runs a customized FreeBSD operating system. It's a standard IBM-compatible server-grade PC. It's got dual Xeons in it. I don't know if they're NetBurst Xeons or something else or what. But then it runs FreeBSD, and it's got this built-in LCD monitor, which is actually addressable as an ordinary monitor by the operating system. But unfortunately, although it's addressable as an ordinary VGA display, this only shows the top left corner of a 640 by 480 image. So it's a 320 by 240 display. And it only displays the top left corner of a 640 by 480 image. This thing has a VGA port on the back, and when you plug in a VGA monitor, it shows what this monitor shows, but only in the top left corner. So I would consider keeping this thing if this was addressable, or you know, if this functioned as an ordinary VGA monitor where it showed the full 640 by 480 image, but it doesn't, so it's not really useful in that sense. It would be really cool if it did, though. And I forget what this has. I think it has like 2 gigabytes of RAM or 1 gigabyte or something like that. ECC RAM, of course. And this has 4, get this, SCSI hard drives. This thing has 4 72 gigabyte SCSI hard drives. And that's what I really want out of this thing, because those hard drives will work in my 3 vintage Macs. They're 68-pin SCSI hard drives, but with a 68-pin to 50-pin adapter. Those will work in my vintage Macs, so I'll have some spare SCSI hard drives. So this is an enormous rack mount thing. It's a 2U rack mount. It's got spring-loaded shuttle dial and jog dial, and it's got transport controls. Meters for 8 audio channels. It's got sort of 2 parallel outputs, so you can actually have it playing 2 things at the same time. You could actually run a TV station with this thing, load it up with programs, and then I believe you can set a schedule on it to just run things in sequence. I might be wrong about that. And then you've got a switch to switch between sets of 2 audio tracks. You got a headphone port on it. Here's the back of this thing. It's BNC City. Now, I would have been more compelled to keep this thing if it had analog inputs on it, but it doesn't. The only input on it is SDI. But it does have a good array of outputs. It's got 2 SDI outputs, composite, and component, and some call them monitor out. I don't know if that's composite or SDI or something else. It's got sync in and out. Oh yeah, and the only if the audio isn't embedded into the SDI, the only other audio input is digital. So these are digital audio inputs, one jack for every 2 channels. And then digital audio output, so you don't even have an analog audio out on this. So it really was for a purely digital, a TV station with a purely digital workflow. Remote ports, I don't know if those are RS-422 or RS-232 or what. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have an analog audio output in the form of this weird DB25 connector. Time code in and out. There's our power supply. There's the power switch. It's a funny switch. It's a rocker switch, but it's spring loaded. So it's a standard ATX power switch, but as a rocker switch. External SCSI port. 2 USB ports. There's your VGA. This switch switches between the built-in monitor on the front or the VGA port. You can only use one at a time. 2 Ethernet jacks, some sort of presumably serial port on a RJ45 jack, and PS2 keyboard and mouse, which we will need to fully explore the user interface on this thing. Alright, let's power this thing on. So I have the baby PVM hooked up to the composite output because when you play back video, it doesn't show it on the internal monitor, it just shows it on the video outputs. So I have the composite input going into this monitor. And then to test recording, because this thing has no recordings on it actually, I have the Canopus ADVC1000 DV to SDI converter, because we're going to use the DV output from this camcorder going into that, and then the SDI output of that goes into the SDI input on this recorder. So we'll use this camcorder to test video recording. Oh, and I forgot a keyboard and mouse. We do need a PS2 keyboard and mouse, so let me get those. Alright, I got my keyboard and mouse. That's actually a USB mouse, but it should work just fine. It's FreeBSD. So let's hit that switch in the back and power this thing on. Audio meters do a little dance. All the buttons are lit up. Still doing the power on self-test. There we go. So we have the standard stock Intel server post screen, but only the top left corner of it. Nice little monitor though. It's too bad it doesn't show a full image. I hear relays clicking inside the machine. I went into the BIOS in this thing once to see if I could slow the fans down, and there's no option for it. The fans just run full tilt all the time. Oh, I heard what sounded like error beeps. Intel Xeon 2.8 gigahertz. I wonder if it's still waiting to do something, or if it beeped 3 times, so that sounds like an error. I wonder if down here below the screen area there's an error message. Maybe if I just hit F1. Well, apparently that was the trick. Showing 3 hard drives. We have 1 gigabyte of RAM. Dual core CPUs, so it detected 4 logical CPUs. There's the actual, this is the configured BSD boot logo. We had 2 of these. I got this one. Another volunteer took the other one and tore it all apart. And he made the joke that there's a very obvious reason why they called it AirSpeed, because that's what it sounds like. Alright, and that's it. And this is the user interface. We can take our mouse here. We have a mouse cursor. And the interface is actually designed not to let the mouse go past the boundaries of the top left corner, so you don't lose it accidentally. But yeah. This thing was pretty complex. It was supposed to wire into your network and communicate with a computer running the Avid software with a USB dongle and all sorts of stuff. But you can get it too, in the most basic sense, record and play back video. Hopefully I remember to do that. So let's fire this stuff up. Power the Canopus up. I got a DV cable here that's gonna go into this camcorder. Okay, the Canopus is seeing this camcorder. That's actually how many minutes I've got on the tape, so it's actually reading the time code. And look at that, there I am on the PVM. So this thing is seeing the video. And I'm just gonna move everything over so I have somewhere to put the mouse, but yeah, there we go. So if I'm gonna capture, I have to give a name to something. I don't know if I can just call it test. And actually, what if I just hit record? And I believe it's going. Oh, maybe not. Record and play. Maybe it is recording, but the clip duration isn't doing anything. Oh, it says clip type virtual. I don't know what that means. So what happens if I hit stop? Oh! Maybe it did record it, because there's a freeze frame on the PVM. Now if I click... oh, I forget there's buttons down here. If I hit play, there we are. There's what we just recorded. How about that? Too bad I can't see if there's sound. The only analog audio output is that that DV25 port. But there you go. We made a recording on this thing and we played it back. Well, of course, one screw was stripped out, so I had to drill it out, but we got this thing open. And we've got our 2 big fans, 4 SCSI hard drives. What kind of hard drives are these? They are Seagate Cheetah 10K.7. All on this big ass card that has another... Oh, actually that's where the SCSI cable comes in. It must go to the motherboard. The motherboard would be under here. And then there's the big board that has all the video processing gunk on it. And then, interesting to me, if you look right here, this is the internal display, and it appears to just plug in through VGA. If I'm correct in that's what it looks like. It's got a Molex connector for power, and then some other connectors, I'm not sure what. I gotta get this out of here. I'm gonna get this display out of here and see what it's got. I got the display module out of it, and it's very intriguing. It's got a Molex for power, and then a VGA input. But then it's got this little, like, SMA looking connector on it. And then this connector, and I don't know what those are. There's the hard drives all on one card. 2 Molex connectors to power them all. And just one SCSI port. Of course, with SCSI you can daisy chain hard drives, so these would be all internally daisy chained via this card. And then just the one SCSI port to go to the motherboard. There's our hard drives freed from their cage. Here's what was responsible for all the noise. These 2 enormous fans, and interestingly one of them is rated 12 volts at 0.3 amps, and this one's rated at 12 volts 1.6 amps, way more powerful. That's like 20 watts. That must be the one that's making all the noise. This one was positioned over the CPUs, and this one was positioned over the power supply. So I'll keep those. I don't know if I'll ever find a use for them, but there they are. And then there's the motherboard. There's the 2 CPUs, those pretty copper heat sinks there. There's the gigabyte of ECC DDR RAM. I'll save that. And then we have maybe a PCI X slot. And then I'm not sure what that would be. There's a SCSI right there. And an ATI Rage XL, the the ham and cheese sandwich of AGP video chipsets. That's where the SCSI plugs in. And there's the power supply. All in this very heavy case. This case is what made up all of the weight of this thing. We also got an IDE controller and what appears to be a floppy controller on this motherboard. It's too bad this isn't a standard motherboard size, or I'd save it and put it in a more manageable case, but it appears to be something specific. If not something proprietary, then something specific to rack mount computers. But there you go. There's a look at this thing. Once again, I'm sorry I have to take it apart, but I don't want it and can't keep it here. It's just too unwieldy, and I'd never use it, and it's unsellable. There's no one around here that'll buy it, and there's nobody afar who would pay the shipping for it. So I'm doing what I have to do. The other one ended up with the same fate. Not by me, but by another volunteer at the station. So, and the station just had no use for these either. Especially without the software, right? So, there you go. A neat piece of hardware, anyhow.